Morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, SwaggerHub for VS Code, expanding your options for API development. I am Calvin Fudge, your moderator for today's webinar. And today we're really excited to be introducing you to a new addition to our API design and development options. This is SwaggerHub for Visual Studio Code, or Swagger for VS Code. It's a new extension that's available in the Visual Studio Marketplace. So I want to tell you a little about it today. Our speakers for today, if I can switch the slide, are Tim McGuire, who's our Senior Director of Product Management for SwaggerHub, and Ben Cross, the intrepid API developer, actually spawned this new extension. So just a couple of instructions before we get started. The session is being recorded, and we are going to provide an archive afterwards that you can view or send to a colleague. We're going to have a demo at the end that Ben's going to take us through. And then after that, we're going to have a brief poll and then jump into some of your questions. For those questions, use the chat window. It's at the bottom of the screen or the top, wherever you have it oriented. Look for chat. We'll capture those and we'll answer as many of those questions at the end of the webinar. So you can enter questions as we're going through. So I guess without any further ado, I will turn it over to Tim, and he can kind of take us through a little bit of the preamble.
Sure. Thanks, Calvin. As Calvin mentioned, my name is Tim McGuire, product manager at SwaggerHub. Well, at SmartBear, working on SwaggerHub. So when we first set out on this, we looked at the SmartBear vision, and we realized that a lot of developers work and have different ways of working, different life cycle processes and so forth. So really, one of the visions of SwaggerHub is to meet teams where they are and help them get where they're going. And we don't expect API developers, really developers or testers in general, to change their processes to fit the SmartBear and SwaggerHub model. We want SwaggerHub and other SmartBear tools to fit into their workflows seamlessly. And this is where we came up with this VS Code extension. So you jump ahead, Calvin. Yes. So when we look at like in that vein, when we look at SwaggerHub and what it is today, it's one of the key value points of SwaggerHub is to be a single source of truth for all API development. That's done through faster, standardized API design, a centralized API collaboration, and then lastly, seamless integrations into your development lifecycle processes to make that more efficient. And VS Code really hits integration with VS Code really hits a lot of these areas. You can design your APIs faster. It's a centralized. You still have the centralized repository of APIs. Inside SwaggerHub is your single source of truth. And this really just tacks seamlessly into your development lifecycle. So, and additionally, SwaggerHub wants API design to be done easily. So we have a platform, SwaggerHub platform today. We have multiple ways to jump into the API design from there. We have a the ubiquitous Swagger editor, which is embedded inside SwaggerHub. We have a visual editor, which allows people to edit documentation right from without having to know the YAML. And lastly, we just added over the summer a CLI tool, so you can edit and publish APIs directly from the command line to help with your API design workflows. And we're looking into another way to expand on this already rich ecosystem. And really, this is where VS Code came into play. It's one of the most popular, or it is the most popular IDE for developers today, especially front-end JavaScript developers. So it's a tool that many people are comfortable using today. Um, and then really, and you have all sorts of other. It's a rich ecosystem of um, of extensions already inside SwaggerHub. So you have it really customized to your own personal preferences, your personal working style inside VS Code. It really ties in well with that. And additionally, now it syncs directly into SwaggerHub, so you don't have to have two tools open to do your API design. And so just looking at this a little bit, so what this actually is, it's a SwaggerHub for Visual Studio Code extension. It enables an API designer to view and edit their APIs directly in VS Code and have those synced up directly with SwaggerHub. So you can navigate your organizations, open APIs directly from SwaggerHub, edit them, preview them, and then publish them back up to SwaggerHub, all without leaving VS Code at all. And the key features that we have with this, which Ben is going to show us in a couple moments, is really you sync up VS Code with SwaggerHub. That enables you to view and navigate your APIs. You can edit and save your API definition files directly from and save them directly to SwaggerHub from VS Code. You can create new APIs. You can delete existing APIs if you need to. You can create new versions of any of your APIs. The auto mocking is still available to you from VS Code. And lastly, as you're editing, you can validate your APIs against the Open API specification. So with that, I will turn it over to Ben to give us a quick run through of some of the exciting features that we have. So, thank you.
And Ben, you may need to take control. I'm going to stop sharing so that you can grab it for your desktop.
We'll wrest control from you, Calvin. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Cross, and I'm a developer and in SmartBear, and I'm primarily a front-end developer. So we do a lot of work just basically making SwaggerHub go. So I've been a developer now for about 3 years at SmartBear. And one of the things that I do is really work heavily a lot with APIs. Obviously, we're an API company, and we do a lot. Our software deals a lot with APIs. So as a front-end developer, we have our own APIs into SwaggerHub. So how the back end talks to the front end. And as a front-end developer, yeah, I need to talk to those too. So one thing that I often find myself doing is working with SwaggerHub itself. Working with SwaggerHub is great, of course. Working with the editor, working with the Swagger UI that we have that allows us to preview. This is really great and a wonderful part of our application. But I find that when I'm working on software, like I'm actually writing the code for this, I find myself having to open two windows. I have Visual Studio Code, which is my main IDE, and I also have Chrome open. And this can be quite, distracting and context switchy. You're moving in, you're moving out. So this is sort of where the idea for me to come up with Visual Studio Code extension came from.
Hey Ben, did you want to show us? I'm seeing your desktop, which by the way is a brilliant black. But I just wondered if you wanted to show us.
Well,
any
am I
of the...
sharing the wrong? This is why. Hey, look, there's something here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Calvin. I appreciate
just a little tease, I think, just to keep people on their toes.
Is everybody seeing the lovely recycle bin icon there? I hope it is keeping you warm at night. So here we have Visual Studio Code, but let's just talk a little bit about one of our things that we have in SmartBear, a culture that we have, which is of sort of innovation. And we like to do hackathons. We like to have ideas and we like to come up with things. So our little hackathons every year is to go through and pick some ideas, just anything you want. We'll take like, say, a week and we'll go, here, have some ideas. Here's a couple of days. Let's go crazy. And we all start coming up with different ideas. These are the things that we really want to do, our little minor passion projects. So what's really cool is this idea just came to me and was like, oh, we could do Visual Studio Code. This would be really exciting and interesting for us. I think we could really do something. But it turns out writing an extension in about 48 hours is a bit much. So this got shelved for a little while, unfortunately, and another idea took its place. Another idea happened to be really good as well, but this Visual Studio Code one, it went onto the back burner for a little while. Until recently, this is a few months ago, we got another one of these, hey, look, let's go and do some passion project stuff. And this came back to the surface again. And in the intervening time, I'd done a little bit of work, a little bit of research, and I figured, hey, I can do it this time. And so I produced a prototype. From that prototype, everything kind of just started running. The value was really there. It ended up being something that was really useful to myself and to other people within the company. And it was one of those things that it was really clear it needed to go out to a wider audience. So today, I suppose I'm going to go through and show you what it is. And this is what we have. So this is Visual Studio Code. This is, of course, our lovely SwaggerHub. And we have a couple of organizations here with some example APIs in here. So I'm going to take you through pretty much all of the functionality into it. There is some nuance, some little bits and pieces in here, but I'm going to show you the broad strokes at least. So first of all, how do you get this extension? So one of the really great things about Visual Studio Code is, of course, that it has a marketplace. Everything is inside this marketplace. It's wonderful. So to get it, type the word SwaggerHub. Here it is. Here's our extension. It's all sorted out for you, built right into the ecosystem. This is great. We have a website, like there is the marketplace website. You can directly go to get it. But from here, you just click the install button. That's it. It was as simple as that, as painless as that. There's some configuration where we have things like your API key. So the backend knows exactly who you are, and you have all your permissions and roles and all that kind of stuff is sorted out. And you get to describe a series of organizations that you want to talk to. I'm not going to show you the configs there. It's kind of boring, to be perfectly honest. But this is what it looks like. So here we have our APIs and our domains. These have all pulled straight from the backend. So now Visual Studio Code is pulling the very same data that populates out in SwaggerHub. So we can see here we have 2 APIs and 1 domain in hyperglobal omni.org. And in our VS Code org demo, a slightly less impressively named organization, we have 3 APIs and another domain here. So we have a tree view structure. This is a very typical VS Code thing. Anyone who's used VS Code should find this pretty intuitive to use. A lot of the same design patterns have been used here as well. So you should be able to flit in and go, oh, I know exactly where everything lies. So here's our org. And we have the tree structure. So we have our org, then we have our API, and then we have the versions of our API. So these all follow underneath a big tree view here. So you can go through. These are all our different ones. As you see, we have multiple different versions of an API. They're all tracked here. We have a star icon. An empty star means that it's not the default version as the tooltip is showing. But if one has a full star, that's the default one. That's the one you would see out in the organization. That's the regular one you would get. So let's open up third-party access API. And it's just a simple API. But what's happened here is we've opened our API in Visual Studio Code. This is obviously exactly the same as if you were to open it out here, third-party access. So this is it. This is our APIs are now alongside all of our development code. So we have full power over all of this. If I was to change the title here, new description, and if we hit save, this is going to save back up to SwaggerHub. And now when we open this API, this is a new description. So we have a two-way connection now. When we make a change in Visual Studio Code, it's out there in SwaggerHub. When we make a change in SwaggerHub, we can get it right here in Visual Studio Code. So if I were to make this from VS Code, ? And let's save this now. So now if I were to refresh this, oh, look, here's our two-way connection. So changes you make in SwaggerHub are reflected out here because it's the same source. We're all talking to the same thing. So any changes you make here obviously propagate back out, but you also get a lot of the benefits you would get out from SwaggerHub as well. So we also have the benefit of the Swagger UI right here in this tab. So any changes you make, and this is what's really nice about this, obviously, are reflected straight away out here. So you have a lot of the same power that you would have by being able to edit the spec, being able to display and interact with the spec as well. We have things like try it out. We have all of the power that you would get from our wonderful friends in open source who've been brought, the SwaggerHub has included and brought under our hood. We have so much of that power, and it's right here in our hands in Visual Studio Code. So this is really great. We have a lot of information as well about the spec you're on. So for example, when I make a save, we have a last save update. So this lets you know, okay, when was the last time you've interacted with a spec? That's really useful. We have private and unpublished here because those are our status. We can change how that status works by using our right-click menu. This was an interesting thing, just to talk about this very briefly. One of the things about the Visual Studio Code API is it's always evolving. This was a new feature that was added just a couple of versions ago, but the ability to actually have a right-click menu that allows you to make all these options. Before that, a lot of UI elements had to be put in different places. But by staying on top of the API, we're constantly pushing Visual Studio Code to the next level. And that's really useful. So being able to say, publish this API, well, it's very simply done like that. And now you have a published API directly from your Visual Studio Code. Likewise, if you decide, oh, I don't want to publish anymore, hey, it's unpublished now. So you have so much control over the things you want to do. And let's say you want to create a new version of this API. That's just as simple as changing the version in the spec and hitting save. When it saves, it spins up a whole new version. And here is your new version 2.0. And this is a brand new version. If we were to refresh out here, you would also see, hey, here's another version for us. So as you can see, we have so much functionality already built into this entire environment, which is really cool. So this is just editing, it's viewing things, it's pretty simple. But what's the most cool thing about SwaggerHub? Well, it's making new APIs. So how can we do that here? We have a plus button. So you have a plus button next to the domains and a plus button next to the APIs. When you click this plus, you're presented with the Visual Studio Code typical way of inputting values. So we can pick an OAS version. Let's pick an OAS 3 because it's great. Pick an organization. Hyperglobal OmniOrg seems good to me. Pick a new name. New name. It's not very original, but it'll do for the time being. Now we can decide, is it going to be a public or a private spec? Let's make it private. And we can at this point choose to switch on auto mocking. We don't have to. We can add it later if we want to, but let's switch it on right now. And now we can pick from a template. We can have one of our pre-existing templates, or you can just create an empty spec and start going crazy yourself. For the template, let's pick, why not? It's a classic. Let's pick Pet Store. And now here we go. We've created the new spec. It's right out here. It's open for you. Out here, back in your APIs, here's your new spec. Here's your new version. Here's the new content, whatever you want. You're done. Here's your new API. Go crazy. When you're back out and we go back into here, we're going to see, hey, here's our new one. That's it. Simple as that. You have a new API now. You can start working through. The same way we have in domains. So we have a lot of power, of course. One of SwaggerHub's great features is the ability to use domains to be able to take individual elements of your spec, put them in a single place, and bring them together. So domains are, of course, fantastic for these things. So we can always create a new one. If we want one, okay, we'll do this and we'll do this and new domain again. And let's just make this one private. And hey, here's a new domain. It's as simple as that. Creating new domains, breaking things down. It really is simple. Creating new versions. This is a really easy way to spin up new versions to keep yourself on track with all of the different elements that are going into your spec and all the different changes you're going to make. As you can see, some people are very terrible about having a final version of an API and a final version of an API. So you can go through and you can make sure you're on track and on top of everything that you see. But of course, we can always delete an API if you so desire. You can just press the X next to one. And now you can choose, okay, do you want to delete that particular version? Let's say, yes, we don't need this final one. The 4.0 final was good enough for me. And now it's gone. And now we're back to 4.0 final. That's really good. And when you delete the last version, cleans out the whole API for you. So that's pretty powerful, just even for management alone of your APIs, to see how many you have, to see all the different bits and pieces you can do. There's so much in just the organization of your APIs from a management point of view. It's really nice and really simple to use. So let's talk a little bit about one of the real nice things that we have, which is validation, spec validation. So Tim had mentioned that earlier. That's one of our key things. And it's one of the key things that we have out in SwaggerHub as well. When you write your APIs, you want to know if they're good. You don't want to produce bad APIs. That's why we have the standard. That's why we have Open API. That's why we have Swagger. So we have that functionality here as well. Let's say this email. We're going to move back. Oh, it's a validation problem. What are we seeing? Well, we're seeing that we are expecting an object here. So contact is expecting to be something, and property email is not allowed. This is because email is now being treated as a top level object within info. It does not conform to the schema. It does not conform to the API schema. When you put it back into place, we've live updated you and everything's good again. We have a lot of power here. There's a lot of power in just writing good APIs. One of the great things, as I mentioned, about SwaggerHub is the ability to just really write good APIs. So much validation, so much good sanitization of the work you're doing. So as you can see, accidentally pressed an N, but oh, look, it tells you not to do that. How wonderful is that? But SwaggerHub has a ton of really great, encouraging things that make you write better APIs and produce better work and make sure your contracts with your developers stay flawless. And you see so much of that here in the Visual Studio Code as well. This is actually, it brings me on to a very small thing that we'll talk about, but Tim made the point earlier that this is an ecosystem. Before, when you work in SwaggerHub, you work to SwaggerHub and SwaggerHub's conventions. And we think they're pretty good conventions. We like them a lot, but they might not be 100% your conventions. The color of font we use might be slightly off for you. You might prefer a more magenta or something like that. Well, that's where Visual Studio Code lets you customize just about everything. As we can see, if we go through the list of extensions that I have here, I have several for Cucumber for work, for linting, for different things around Git. I have lots of different customizations, and you can have them all, and they all work with this. Visual Studio Code, as any developer knows who uses it, it's a whole world. It's a world of extensions. It's a world of customizability. For us, we just fit right in there. Now SwaggerHub gets all the benefits of those things. If you have a spell checker, if you have something else that does any work, any particular like linting or anything, it's going to work here too. That's really nice. And because we're in YAML, we conform to all these things. So we use a YAML processing. All that validation comes through a third-party library developed by Red Hat, just called YAML. Not very creative, but certainly on the nose. And they are providing us with all of this stuff. This is an underlying extension that we incorporate and give you all the benefits of without having to go look it up yourself. That is part of one of the best things about Visual Studio Code. We can really tailor this. As developers, we tailor it how we want to. And as a SwaggerHub itself, in our components, we say, okay, we think this is really going to provide a lot of value, so let's add this in. There are other components and other extensions that will also add a ton of value. And we have some recommendations of things, but you can also just recommend them yourself, or you can see if there's anything else. We're totally open to a lot of features, and this is the first step on what we think is going to be a long road of feature improvements and additions. And we're completely open to any suggestions people have for the directions they want to take it, because we think we have a good idea of how this works. I know when I developed this, I was really going for, I want my code here and I want my YAML here, and I want to look at them both, and I want to implement one as I deal with the other. I want it all in one place. Going crazy with power. I want everything here. I don't want to leave. This is my home. Don't make me go anywhere. And so that's what we did. We brought SwaggerHub here. Now that's a lot of our functionality has been covered here. There's a lot of things that we can do here. Auto mocking I mentioned earlier. Auto mocking is very simple. Let's create a new API and let's add some, let's create it without. So let's say no auto mocking. Private, no auto mocking. That's exactly what we want. And let's create a simple API. So now we're going to create a new one. Auto mocking is a really nice way to test to see what kind of responses you're going to be expecting out from your API. So if we add auto mocking here, it just very simply just goes, hey, it adds it, hooks it up to the Vert server, and all of a sudden we have our auto mocked API. So now we can do try it outs. So if we get on this inventory and we're going to get a string, one string, and this will be fine. And if we try it out and execute, hey, we're going to get 200, and these are all our values back. So that's one of the powers. We have auto mocking. You can write your API. You can test your API. You can write the code that makes all this happen from all within one space. That's power. That's really great. So I can talk now just a few little tips and tricks now that all the functionality has really been covered about this. So one of our great benefits out in SwaggerHub is the ability to just navigate around really quickly. We have like there's a side nav, which has all the different locations, and in Swagger UI, we can jump to here. So we have a lot of nice things that we've picked up just from being in Visual Studio Code. So here's an internal reference. And if we just control and click, we can just go right to that reference itself. So we can jump around our spec pretty easily. We can use the peek to look ahead, so we don't actually have to move. So we can see, okay, what's the structure of this one going to be like? Those are a couple of really nice things that we have. You have filtering as well. So if you have a lot of APIs in here, just click into the tree view here and start typing. So if I want to pick very important API, so I just type the word very here, and then you get a filter. Visual Studio Code has a real nice filtering for their tree view, allows you to do some very interesting things. But if you have a lot of APIs, and certainly SwaggerHub has a lot of APIs, a lot of versions of APIs, we have a lot of data. And I know a lot of companies have a lot of data. And if you're running across multiple orgs filled with multiple specs, filled with multiple versions, well, that's when this filtering comes in very handy. And that we just get for free because Visual Studio Code's a real nice IDE like that. So if I want to go down a store that is definitely not a pet store, spoiler alert, it absolutely is a pet store, we can just filter it for it here, and then we can get that one together, and then that's it. And then here we are. So there's a lot of really nifty things. And I think we're only kind of scratching the surface of the possibilities of this. In the coming weeks, months, and hopefully years, decades, and millennia, we're going to be bolting more and more stuff onto this. We're going to be just making it everything it can be. There's so much potential in Visual Studio Code. There's so much power here. We're just at the forefront of exposing it all to the world. But judging by the initial uptake, it looks like people are enjoying what we've got. And hopefully some of this work that I've been talking about on the call will translate over, and you can start working it into your workflow as well. I know it's become an invaluable part of my workflow, and it really just has made my life better. That's quite a grandiose thing to say, but it certainly has improved a lot of the work I've done. But I think that is about it as far as demo goes.
And
So
Ben, let me just mention, this is the initial version, right? You've got some things that you're planning to do on some subsequent versions. So I guess input, if people are on the marketplace and they can interact and send in suggestions or questions to you.
Absolutely. So we definitely have ideas and definitely have things that we want to do. There are big things that we know where we want to get to next, and we have a roadmap, but we want to really see how people are using it, because one of the things that I found was that my initial view of how it would work quite kind of evolved over time on the benefits of it, of being able to have so many different things open, to have multiple different specs open. And don't forget, we're Visual Studio Code. We can split things up and again and have a spec and a spec and a spec. And then this bit's JavaScript. And then we're pulling this bit and doing these other things, and we can split them how we want to. I found myself just, okay, I'm working across specs more. And that was because my own evolution of working with this tool changed. And as people start using it, their interactions with this tool will change. And we want to know that. How are you using it? What's great about it? What's bad about it? Just, talk to us. We're at an early stage. We have this release. We think it's great, but we have a roadmap, and we want to see that roadmap and make sure it's influenced in the right ways. Make sure that people's contributions and what they're really wanting from this comes through in the roadmap in the next feature set. Because yeah, Calvin, you're right. We do have plans. We have big things coming, but
and the other
please help.
side of that flexibility is this is treated as a piece of product functionality. So it goes through the normal QA process. I mean, we could have probably rolled it out easily a month or more ago, but we wanted to put it through our own internal QA and a customer beta QA. So there was a lot of kind of the same kind of product processes that we do for any feature that we roll out. But we allow for evolution. We allow for the fact that there are things that you might notice that need to be changed. So, but it has been thoroughly QA'd before we ever put it out.
Definitely. This is a process of iteration that we've been through. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it was only like a few days in that we had a prototype going, and the prototype had a lot of functionality. In fact, it had far too much functionality. So our process over the last few months has been really honing it down to the key parts, really making them strong, really putting it in front of customers and putting it in front of beta users, and really getting feedback, really saying, okay, what works here, what doesn't work here, how does it work in this context, how does it work in that one, and really pushing the boundaries of it to make sure that even the first release is as high quality as we can make it. So it definitely there's a lot of QA, there's a lot of everything gone into this.
And we actually have customers now using it in production.
Oh yeah, there are hundreds of installs, and we know, yeah, definitely there are hundreds of users already.
Well, speaking of those users, we've got a number of them that are ready to ask questions and provide some feedback. So Tim, you and Ben want to jump into some of the Q&A and chat window questions?
Sure. Just so some of the questions, one of the first questions I see here, I'm familiar with Swagger Open API. A question about on-premise. Will this work with on-premise or just the SaaS version of SwaggerHub? The answer is yes, it does work for on-premise as well. In order to get this to work for on-premise, you'll need to change the endpoint URL. So Ben, if you want to bring up the settings, do you have the settings available to you? We can show you. But in the settings, if you change your the URL from app.swaggerhub.com to your on-premise URL right here, right there, change that and then add a /v1 at the end. This will work for on-premise.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's one of the cool things about this is that you can change the route. So we currently point for SaaS, but you can change that to be whichever endpoint you choose.
There's another question. Do we have plans to create and trigger the integrations? I'm assuming that these are like the SwaggerHub integrations with Bitbucket and so forth. Yes, we have a long roadmap for this. The initial phase of this, as Ben mentioned, we kind of had a little bit too much in it. We scaled back, and the first release of this was really focused on the API design and development experience. We wanted to make sure we had a rock solid implementation of being able to create APIs, edit APIs, and save those APIs within VS Code. The next, to give you a hint of where this is going, the next thing we want to bring in some of the collaboration functionality, some of the commenting, so you can read, edit, review comments, resolve comments directly from VS Code, view those in SwaggerHub and so forth. And then we're going to look into some of the more advanced functionality of SwaggerHub, such as the standardization and the integrations and so forth. So that's kind of that's more of the longer term roadmap here.
Just as a small little addendum to that, I demonstrated that we used auto mocking and how that works. Auto mocking is in itself an integration. So we've already laid groundwork for bringing in integrations. We've already got a lot of the underlying basis there. It's just about, choosing, as Tim says, with the roadmap. But certainly that was one of the key things that came up when we were developing this, was getting that extra functionality available.
Yep. Yes.
There was a follow-on question, Tim, about the individual that was looking for the SaaS versus on-premise question, mentioned that this is where his API key is located. Can you provide a little clarification on that? When you went into settings and
Sure. So yeah, Ben, do you want to show exactly how people can retrieve their API key from here?
Sure. So our API key is here in the settings, and you would get this API key pretty straightforward out in SwaggerHub. If you head up to the settings and you go to API keys, here's your API key. Just give it an old copy and place it back in here. And that's it. And now your API key is bound, and that's the one that's going to be used.
so
Ben,
it's
you'll probably
different
have
from
to, yeah, Ben, you'll have to regenerate a new key directly after the recorded demo
For
here.
sure.
Quick, everyone, make a screen grab.
So
What are some of the other questions that we have that right now we've got almost 20 questions. So thanks everyone. Some good suggestions also coming in on features that you're interested in.
yep. So I think the 403 forbidden error that will be resolved with the API key. There is someone brought up a point about there is a bug that we're looking into inside SwaggerHub about in the Swagger UI. It says something went wrong, and the Swagger UI sometimes goes blank. We do have a bug fix for that, and we're currently investigating that, so we'll get that resolved pretty soon. Do you have fork and merge feature API or domain like we have in this? So currently, the fork and merge is not inside VS Code yet. This is on our roadmap for this as well. But we will be looking into adding that functionality down the road. Yes, we are recording this, and we will share the recording with everybody and post it to the smartbear.com website shortly after the presentation today. Do you have auto refactoring when we rename an API domain or definition? Not quite sure. Ben, do you know about that?
Yeah, we don't have that. Unfortunately, we don't have it in SwaggerHub. There's a bit of concept that when you change a domain, it goes through and changes for everything. You are indicated and you are notified that, hey, something's your domains that are your APIs that reference those domains will no longer function. So you are told, and these are the affected affected APIs, but we don't actually have that. It's certainly something that's on our backlog of things to do. It's very delicate, though. There is always a fear that we're making a vast amount of changes to a vast amount of specs. Potentially, it's definitely something that we want to approach with kid gloves, but it's also something that we're very aware of, and there is definitely work and thought being put into it already, and it will certainly need to be prioritized accordingly.
Do you have auto completion with domain definitions like we have in SwaggerHub? Unfortunately, that is not included right now. That also came in as an enhancement on our GitHub backlog just last night as well. So we've added this as an enhancement, and this is something that we will start investigating this as well. So I should just mention we do have a there is a link from the settings page to go to. There is a GitHub repo that we have where anybody can ask questions, report bugs, ask feature enhancements can be added there. And as a team, we are we are reviewing these. So Ben is about to bring that up. So right here. So going down the road, report new bugs, suggest features, upvote, submit just general feedback, all through here. So we actively review this backlog, and you can continue to communicate with us down the road on VS Code functionality and bugs. Yeah. Okay, that's
so there's so I noticed there that there's a couple of questions in here about whether we can compare different versions of an API. So what's interesting about the Visual Studio Code is, while we don't necessarily have that function built ourselves, we do, of course, have all the benefits of Visual Studio Code. So if we were to open up this window and we would have a version 1 in here, there are diffing tools and diffing extensions already within Visual Studio Code. You can just diff across the two different windows. So it might not be something that we necessarily are going to include, but that's one of the great things about this ecosystem. If you want it, someone's probably already done an extension for it, and it's probably already there. We're just showing files. So that's really nice in that we're treating the data as data, and you can apply anything you want to it. You can diff across this. You can do however you like.
Ben, that's a great point. One of the first beta customer feedback that we had was a customer that basically is using SwaggerHub as it should be, as their API platform, and are plugging the extensions that he wanted into that platform, into the SwaggerHub instance of VS Code. So think about Swagger being that SwaggerHub, and looking out across the ecosystem of Visual Studio and finding those pieces you like, and then plugging them into your instance of SwaggerHub.
Yeah, and I'd just like to follow on, because I think this isn't just about SwaggerHub here. This is about how everything can make SwaggerHub better, how your APIs can be better now. So for example, we had a question up there of a great suggestion of being able to have different parts of your node, like different parts of your actual component within your API itself. So we have we have breadcrumbs up here that allow us to take the different parts of it and to see where those different parts go. So that's something we get for free. But then there is things like, there is a great extension from 42 Crunch. They do a Swagger editor, and they will give you this little extra piece on the side. Now, what that means is you open up a spec, and here you have all of the controls that you want. So if you want to break down through each of your individual pieces, it's going to break them up itself. Here are your schemas, breaking these down piece by piece, and it will isolate them and allow you to move towards them. So this is another one of these really great things, and something that can't be emphasized enough. This isn't just SwaggerHub. This is now everything in VS Code is now in SwaggerHub. Everything you want to. That's super good. You can't get away from the fact that the potential for creativity here is off the charts. There's so many different ways to interact with Swagger, so many different ways to interact with YAML, to interact with this text, and they're all powered through Visual Studio Code. The possibilities are endless. Rant over.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up about that, because I just saw that question come in about the expanding it. So that's why it's a lot of functionality here. As Ben, as you mentioned, it's this whole VS Code ecosystem that we're tapping into here. So you're not only using SwaggerHub functionality inside VS Code, but there's other VS Code functionality to enrich your developer experience. And yeah, this Open API editor from VS Code is a very popular VS Code editor. You can see everything that Ben has for diffing that we have that will be available to you. There's one question. May I ask if we have a conflict resolving strategy when two people work on the same API. So currently that's a functionality of just SwaggerHub. Unfortunately, it's not into VS Code. We do have this enhancement on our backlog. However, it's just not in VS Code yet. Though the suggested workaround might be to create a private version of an API and work on that one in VS Code, and then merge them together inside SwaggerHub. So what other questions do we have here?
We do have a quick poll to run. So I'm
Sure.
going to launch that while you read through some questions.
Okay. So there's a lot of actually, I see a lot of questions coming up about Git. So again, this kind of taps into the overall VS Code extension ecosystem with where you have your Git integrations can be run directly from VS Code as well. So that can definitely be done. Anything you can do in VS Code, you can do with an open API file through the extension as well. So that gives you a little bit more functionality there. Ben, anything you want to add to that as well as we go through this?
So we obviously don't have the SCM connectivity that we do out in SwaggerHub. So SwaggerHub does have the ability to push and pull to repos. That is not part of our initial outlay. That's obviously a big thing for us and has been a big push as part of the software itself to try and bring more source control management in. That's not here, not in the first version, but it's absolutely one of the things that we really want to push to. So I just say that as an extra bit.
Okay, thanks.
Why don't I bring up the slide real quick to show people where there's some resources. Just once, let me just share my screen real quick. So for anyone that's, we are providing a recording, so you'll get a copy of that, and you can always also go to the webinar afterwards. If you go into SmartBear and resources and webinar, and you'll find it there, and it's on demand if you want to do it that way, but you'll get a copy of that. As Ben mentioned, there's easy, you can either type in SwaggerHub for VS Code and get to the marketplace that way, or if you already have it downloaded, you can find it within VS Code itself. Ben was nice enough to create a short demo video, not the webinar, but actually a demo video where he takes you through. So it's a shorter listen, like, I don't know, what is it, 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes. So that's available, and you'll find that link when you, I think I'm going to tweet it out later today. So just look either in VS Code extensions or hashtag VS Code, and it'll be a tweet out there. Also, there's a blog, developer blog, that kind of takes you step by step through, how to use the new extension. One thing I should mention, it's an extension of SwaggerHub, so you're going to need SwaggerHub to utilize the extension. But I just want to make sure that people didn't, if they go and they download it, you don't have SwaggerHub, got to get SwaggerHub first, and you can certainly get a free trial of SwaggerHub. And if you like it, we'd love to talk to you about a plan, but certainly download a free trial. There was a question about they're using Swagger currently, and is this something that might, what do they need if they're a Swagger customer or Swagger user? Are they going to have to go to SwaggerHub? Yes, it's a SwaggerHub. There are extensions out there. A lot of people, Swagger is open source, so a lot of people have created things around Swagger. This is the only that's actually the full-fledged, product with the repository for all your open API definitions, the collaboration tools, and so on and so forth. So anyway, this will be in the slides, so you don't have to worry about the links. It'll be there, and you can just click it when you get back. With that, we have some more questions. I don't know if you want to tackle those, or do you want to maybe do those offline? If there's anything that we need to capture right now, we can certainly take a couple more. We have a minute or two left.
There's one right here. Can SwaggerHub specs be included in workspaces along with related code? Ben, do you want to talk to that one? You're the expert on this, so I kind of defer to you on this one.
So no, they can't. Not right now. The APIs are very much tied to the SwaggerHub component, the extension. So when you exit, those APIs are removed. So it's very much when you open up and you're working with this stuff, it's very much in the session. We don't store any of these things or anything like that. So preserving an API across workspaces or anything, along with the related code, that's not really part of it. It doesn't have that. It's not connected on a spec level. It's connected on an extension level. So that's not functionality. I'd be personally really interested to see if that was possible, though. So if you want to open an enhancement and talk about that, I will probably just be thinking about that anyway now.
Mhm. I think we've hit most of the questions right now.
Okay. Anyone who hasn't gotten their question answered, we'll go through the list that you sent, the chats and the Q&A, and we'll get back to you on that. If you think of something afterwards, go to the Git repository. There's where you can enter your questions as well as enhancement requests, and then we'd love to get a review. So in the marketplace, after you've had a chance to tinker around with it, certainly give us a review. And with that, we just want to thank everybody for joining us, giving us 45 minutes of your time. Also, thanks to Tim and Ben for pulling this program together and kind of putting it together. We'll come back to you once we have some new kind of news and enhancements on it. We'll do another webinar in subsequent months to kind of give you an update of what's going on with it. But with that, we hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and thanks again for attending.